All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Mental Wellness Podcast for Convene. So I have two special guests on tonight, and Doc.
I
Doc,
can't help it. I got to
can't stop
move.
dancing. That's
I
how
got
it
to
works.
move.
That's how it works. So, Sam and Steve, how are y'all doing tonight?
Good.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start out. We're going to be talking about mental fitness. I think this is great. This topic to me is wonderful. A lot of people watching are on this. They've heard me go on and on and on about how, we beat ourselves up. We beat, our kids up. We beat ourselves up as adults with mental health. And sometimes mental health has a bad connotation. I like to call it mental wellness. But you guys are going to bring in and talk about the concept of mental fitness. And I think that is absolutely outstanding. So let's go through this and let's introduce ourselves. Steve, we'll start with you. How about that?
Cool. My name is Steve Wize. I am the president and founder of Mental Fitness LLC. We're a counseling service out of Cranberry Township, Pennsylvania. But beyond that, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a therapist. For me, mental fitness, the idea of it is that I want to expand the spectrum of mental health so that we're not just looking at removing distress and dysfunction and perpetuating the stigma that comes with having a mental health issue, but looking at the fact that everyone has room for improvement in their mental fitness. And that is what I and mental fitness is kind of all about here. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks.
And we're going to get into it. So Sam, you and I have known each other for many years. I've interviewed you multiple times. So let's introduce you.
Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it. My name is Sam Anthony, and I am a professional speaker, a personal trainer, and a mental fitness certified life coach. And for the past 7 years, I've been using my experiences with addiction, substance abuse, alcoholism, depression, and most importantly, recovery and mental fitness to try to inspire others to learn from my mistakes so they don't have to make their own.
Absolutely. And that's so in line with what we are here at Convene. We believe in that, we all have a story. We all have something to share. We all walk this path and, we don't want people to make the same mistakes over and over. So we do take our experience and our stories and share them with others. So, we can all learn collectively. And I think that becomes very important. So, Steve, expand on it. Why did you go this direction? Why did you start focusing on mental fitness instead of the norm that's out there, mental health and mental wellness?
Yeah. So a little backstory. When I was in 8th grade, I lost my cousin to a heroin overdose, and that was a bummer. He was like a brother to me. So it got me wondering, like, why and how does this happen? So I went on to study psychology, and then I went on to get a master's in social work because I knew I wanted to kind of figure out how to help people. So I did that for a couple of years at a methadone clinic, and that was a great exposure to helping people achieve recovery. But what I found was we focused a lot on relapse prevention and coping skills. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. However, the more we focused on it, the more it started to not fully make sense to me. Like, if you think about how do I not do drugs? Drugs ruined my life. Like, how do I avoid drugs or the persons, places, or things that could trigger me to use drugs? It's very drug centric. And a lot of the counseling becomes like teaching someone to play golf by saying, don't hit the water. And if you think don't hit the water, don't hit the water, don't hit the water, you kind of miss the point, which is it's a lot better in our psychological self-talk to think, put it on the green. So for me with mental fitness, I wanted to give people a path to kind of get addicted to self-improvement so that our focus goes on how do I get as mentally fit as possible, which is a game that keeps going. Our physical fitness is going to peak at like 30, unless you're Doc, who's going to peak at 70. Just keeps going up and up.
If I live that long.
Right? But we can focus on our mental fitness all throughout our life. We can keep growing in that. And when I helped people shift their focus from avoiding drugs to growing in their mental fitness, that's when I really saw and witnessed a large transformation in my clients and in myself. And that kind of spurred me on to know that that was kind of my calling and what I wanted to start as a business.
Yeah. And Sam, you've been speaking and teaching and talking out in schools for a long time. And so, you see this and I want you to get not to focus on your story, but right. You have something to share with these kids when you go out and talk to them and you speak in schools. And how have you taken this message of mental fitness and how it affected your life, your story, and how you've turned things into something? I watch your Facebook and all that stuff, and I see what you're doing, in the gym and doing everything that you're doing. It's pretty amazing.
Thanks. I appreciate that. My journey with mental fitness has been a very interesting one. And my introduction to Steve by a mutual friend was one of the best introductions that I ever had, because I've been speaking about mental fitness, I mean, pretty much since I got sober. I just didn't really have a lot of framework behind it. And then I met this guy up in Cranberry that had a company called Mental Fitness LLC. And I realized that I was the walking, living example to all the research that he had done and put in the book, which was pretty cool. And the way that I use mental fitness moving forward is that I've had a lot of experiences with intensive outpatient programs and counselors and 12-step meetings. And I never found one particular modality that really worked well. With 12-step, I always found like it was enough to get me sober, but not keep me sober. My counselors only took me so far. I had some great mentors. And then I was introduced to this guy called Steve, and I was given this mental fitness workbook, and I started going through it, and there were so many crossovers from what I read and the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and things that they teach in SMART, things that I heard in my intensive outpatient programs. But like he said, it wasn't drug focused, it wasn't problem focused, it was solution focused. And it allowed me to realize that my problems were not people, places, and things, and that I was the gatekeeper of my thoughts, and that is okay to have a negative emotion with a positive thought. And once I learned to kind of rewire my brain, I was able to carry that message and tell others, well, if it worked for somebody as simple as me that was down in the dumps and almost lost his life and his freedom to drugs and alcohol, then it could definitely work for you, because I'm not doing anything special except for following directions, which were, put together by this guy over here.
Yeah. Wow. What got you there, Steve? Like what research? What were you looking at? I know
So
that's a deep question.
yeah, experientially, in my 20s, I was very into endurance athletics. I still like endurance athletics, but it's a lot more scaled down with two kids. So I just don't have the time to invest into it like I did then. But I really wanted to push myself and find some of the limits of my physical potential. And what I found was, we always say that sports and physical fitness are 90% mental,
Yeah.
but
Right.
we don't coach any of the mental side of it. So as I'm working with clients and I'm seeing their thought patterns, and I've done some research here. A recent study came out from Queen's University, says we have 6,200 thoughts per day.
Yeah.
I think that number is actually a little small, because they were looking at kind of categories of thought. So like focused thoughts, and every time we switch from one focus to the next. But that's 6,200 thoughts a day. We know that we ought to walk 10,000 steps. We know we ought to consume 2,000 calories, but we don't think about the thoughts we consume. And just like if we consume a whole bunch of greasy cheeseburgers, we're going to feel tired and sluggish. I try to help people recognize that the thoughts they consume are going to be at the heart of how they feel, what they experience, and what they attract.
Yeah.
And when I can help people realize the only thing we're 100% in control of is our thinking, and they get to be a little better gatekeeper, we also find in the research that 95% of our thinking is the same as the days before.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
get really conditioned and really good at a certain way of thinking. And when you can help people percentage wise kind of change their thoughts, which is at the core of everything, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So I look at kind of just myself as being a little bit of a thought consultant and helping people kind of figure out, just like a dietitian, is this greasy cheeseburger healthy for me? What's a better alternative?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, to me, the number one topic in America, I mean this, the number one topic in America is mental health or mental wellness or mental fitness. It is. It's what we are everybody's going through it. And if you're not personally going through it, somebody who is going through it. And again, like we were talking about earlier with, our kids, if you have younger kids or teenagers or even young adults, the majority of them, if not all of them, they have a therapist. They have somebody they're seeing to talk to about, their mental health. And then also in schools, this is a pet peeve of mine. I'll go ahead and give you a pet peeve. And this is could be a plug for you, Sam, and you too, Steve, is that, they give these mental health days off, right? And so you get a mental health day off. And so what does that mean? If I'm a young boy, a young teenager boy, what does that mean for me if you give me a mental health day off? I'm gonna go home and play Xbox all day or play PlayStation, right?
All I'm going to say is that I'm going to need to shave my palms the next day. That's all I'm saying.
But listen, if you do that, then why not have a teacher's work day or whatever it is and bring somebody like Sam or you, Steve, into the auditorium, and give them the tools, give them the things that they need to work on, coping skills, to work on handling stress and anxiety. That's what should be happening, not necessarily sending you home to have a rest day, because there's no rest day. What about the kids who have parents who work, who, they're sitting in their house all day, all alone? What about the kids who maybe not have any food? But so, Sam, that's where you come in, right? You come in as a speaker, and you're able to go into these schools and relate a message of how to take this message of mental fitness and move forward.
Man, as you were talking about, it's the hottest topic in the country and everybody suffers from it. And then you started talking about our youth. I got to tell you, since I started speaking, I've reached about 100,000 students from New Jersey to California and everything in between. I've been to some of the richest districts, some of the poorest, some of the biggest, some of the smallest, some of the most unique, and some of the most diverse. I have not been to a single school where I have not had multiple kids come up to me in person or via DM, tell me they're vaping, they're self-harming, they have somebody that's overdosed in their life, they've tried to take their own life, or they're thinking about it. And to follow up on what you said about the mental health days, I'm a firm believer in what you consume eventually consumes you. So to give these kids a day off and allow them to go home and just watch TV, which probably led to the bad mental health in the first place, or that video game that did nothing to improve their mental wellness in the first place, probably not the best idea. So yeah, there's a lot of different options where schools and districts can have some sort of a better framework to what does that mental health day look like. Well, maybe it's some sort of a webinar that's put on by Steve or myself or somebody else in the field, because the truth is him and I can't be everywhere at the same time. But there's definitely better options than just a day off, because the amount of time that these kids are spending isolated as it is probably just as much of the problem. So what we're doing is we're offering a problem to a solution to a problem that is the problem in the first place. Like you're isolated, you don't have any mentorship, you don't have any guidance. Let's send you home with no mentorship and no guidance.
Yeah, it's really awesome. So let's talk about it, Steve. So what's the program? Let's break down the program and kind of walk through it a little bit to give everybody kind of an idea of what we're doing.
It is, oh, man. So it is not small.
And it should be.
When we think of mental health, I didn't want to do it wimpy, mental fitness, right? So there's a lot of folks out there who want to come in and want to talk about the basics and want to give, a nice feeling to students. And that's great, right? You can be a motivational speaker and you can give the students a good feeling. The challenge with that is if you come in, no matter how much you rock that speech for a period, 45 minutes, whatever it is, an hour, the challenge is it's still only a tiny dose. So what I did is I wrote a book, Mental Fitness, went to get an agent, got an agent quite quickly to get traditionally published. So I was really excited. But it was right in the beginning of COVID. And the agent who accepted me took me to traditional publishers, which is usually a good sign. It was universally rejected because I didn't have a strong social media following. I'm a therapist. My clients are confidential. Nobody disliked the content or my credentials or anything. It's just I just didn't have a large social media following. So it's like, all right, what do I do with this? So I started doing a masterclass. I was like, I'm going to spread this message because that's my mission. No matter what it takes. So when kind of worked through that failure, if you will, started to create a masterclass. What I found was it's really hard to be a filmographer and instructional designer all on your own. But it caught the attention of the University of Pittsburgh. So Pitt reached out to me and said, hey, Steve, we've approved you for a bunch of CEs for your speaking engagements throughout the years. How would you like if we gave you 2 filmographers, the studio space, and instructional designer, and we turn this into a course to train therapists in kind of the new modality, the new therapeutic approach that is mental fitness? And I was like, that's amazing. Thank you guys so much. Super cool. So coming out this year later, we're going to have a 30 CE program for all therapists, all licensed counselors like yourself. Pitt is approved in PA in New York right now, but within the next year, they'll be approved by ACE, which means therapists across the nation can take this for 30 CEs. Yeah. That made me manualize the entire course.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it made me come up with 12 modules, 12 chapters, whatever you want to call it, focused on removing toxic thinking and replacing it with something that is much more mentally fit, mastering emotions, using stress to your advantage rather than labeling it as a chronic nuisance, removing judgment, assertive communication, how to bring out the best in others, improving relationships, goal setting, finding values, and leadership. All the things that we don't teach in high school that I think we should be.
Yeah.
2024, we ought to be teaching those soft skills, those leadership, that mastering emotions, so that kids know what to do with that and doing it proactively. And that's what I tried to do with kind of the creation of the course. So when Sam and I go in and speak, we're not just speaking. We want to help it make true change, for it to be an initiative to get that kind of dose that really sticks with the kids, that makes a lasting impact.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Andy, you got a question?
I do. Per show, I have one quota for one serious question. So here it goes. Your course that you're putting out, is it going to be only for licensed professionals? Or I'll give you an example. I'm a firm believer in peer-to-peer counseling. I do a lot of it with the organization that Matt and I belong to. And I've done a lot of mental health counseling throughout my career. And it's something that I want to stay a part of. I was recently going to Liberty University to get my count, the same degree that Matt has. However, they changed the curriculum, and there is no course towards licensure or certification. So I stopped going for obvious reasons. So yeah, it's a long-winded question for a simple answer, I'm sure.
So the answer is no. That is going to be one pathway of mental fitness for licensed therapists to get CEs through the University of Pittsburgh. I'm incredibly thankful for that, because it made me manualize everything. So we got a breakdown of kind of products here. We have an Audible book that was the original kind of general population traditionally published manuscript that has concepts, stories, illustrations that, kind of show the concept, research, and that was like the main kind of book. I broke that down into a workbook. I just took the concepts, removed the research and illustrations, and put the concepts and worksheets together. Then I broke it down into a personal journal that is a lot more digestible, just to kind of give people guidance to their journaling. So what I envision with this, and what Sam and I have already started, Sam being the first mental fitness certified life coach, is that we've turned this into, because Pitt made us manualize it, and I'm so thankful for that. There's discussion questions, there's quiz questions, there's knowledge checks, there's definitions. It is now a textbook that can be taught at any level. And so I don't want it just to teach other therapists to be able to use mental fitness and have it have a whole bunch of therapeutic jargon and language that makes it exclusive. I want it to be able to be taught in high schools, college universities. If you look at Harvard right now, the #1 class at Harvard is a course on happiness. So there's demand, right? And I want it to be accessible to people who don't want to spend 8 years and $100,000, which is the only pathway right now to being a professional counselor. That's a big investment. I want to give people with life experience the opportunity to leverage that life experience, show that they've turned a pain into a purpose, find that same niche, and help those same people turn their pain into purpose as well.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a big dream here. It's still in its infancy in many ways, but I'm excited to not just have it restricted to professionals with degrees, but to help it train other life coaches and to really be accessible without borders.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, what you got?
Yeah, so to kind of complement what Steve was saying, oftentimes when we think mental health, we automatically think of somebody with distress or dysfunction, right? When I was going in and just sharing my personal experience before collaborating with Steve, I was touching all of the students that already had distress, dysfunction, or on the brink of potentially making a bad decision. And then Steve put this together. Like he said, it's not a wimpy workbook. This is 287 pages. There's a lot of knowledge in here, a lot of research, a lot of depth. And now we're not just reaching the person with distress, dysfunction on the brink of a bad decision. We're reaching the student that just isn't living up to their full potential. They're a C student, but they should be an A student. Maybe it's the dad that feels like he's falling short in his journey as a father, or possibly even as a husband. Maybe it's the person in the workplace that really deserves a promotion, but they just don't have the confidence to actually step up and act like the leader that they should be. And that's where this comes in. It's not just for the person that's struggling. For the person that's struggling, we're going to hope to get them out of the hole. And for the person that is good, we're going to try to take them from good to great. Compliment Jim Collins.
Yeah, look, I can see 1,000. I mean, just going through my mind, I can see 1,000 applications for it. I was a college baseball player. I mean, think about college athlete or any athlete, not just college. The mental fitness, that's huge, right? I mean, we live and die as a baseball player. You live, eat, and sleep mental fitness, right? You go into a slump, your mental game gets off, and you go downhill. But if you're on top of that mental fitness, I mean, that's what my coach used to preach it. He used to really just really focus on our mental fitness. It was actually bizarre to us because he was that type. He had been a Muay Thai kickboxer and gone over and fought in Thailand and all that. And he brought all that thought process to what we were doing inside of baseball. And we all thought it was the craziest thing. You know, young 18-year-old baseball players were like, what is this dude talking about? But he was spot on because that carried over into, believe it or not, into my career as a, Marine Corps pilot and leading missions and doing the mental, fitness that I had to hold up to my end of the ball. I could go on and on about what y'all are, you're talking about. And I think it's so needed. Like, I mean that. I told you I would tell this one story, and I like to say this about my daughter, Megan. She's at medical school in Georgetown. But my older son and my daughter, they used to call me around exam times when they were in college. And the stress level, when exams hit, it's high, when you're in college, and especially when you're, all these kids are pushing to work at this high level. So Megan and or Braden, they would call me and they would be really stressed out. And I'd be like, well, what are you stressed out about? And they're like, well, I got 3 exams this week. And to your point, we look at, we let that stress and anxiety overwhelm us. But the reality of it is you have to deal with it. It's real life. You got 3 exams. Let's go. So we haven't given the tools, or do you have the tools to to manage that anxiety, to get through what you're going through to succeed in exams? And they call me right afterwards, after I'd talk them off the ledge and talk them through it. And they call me right after this and they would say, oh yeah, Dad, you were right. Well, how'd you do? Well, they did well. They all did well. Obviously Megan's at Georgetown, so she did well. Picked her up over Thanksgiving weekend, was driving her home from Georgetown. And she said, hey, I want to tell you something. You were right. And I was like, well, what was I right about? And she said, well, I figured out that medical school is kind of hard. I'm like, yeah, it is. And she said, so I figured out that I have to learn how to accept that and manage the stress and anxiety that I'm under because it's hard. Well, that's life. And I think that that's what we are going through in society, whether you're an adult, whether you're a parent, whether you're a kid, whether it's in your marriage, whether it's whatever it is, we're letting this stuff overwhelm us because we don't have the mental fitness to be able to take it on, to take life on.
It's interesting choice of words there. Steve, what's step 3 in reframing stress?
To accept.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
But what I'm thinking here, the best teacher I ever had was a Navy SEAL, a former Navy SEAL, Lynn Light. Crazy man, died a couple years ago. Crazy in a charismatic, wonderful way. I remember one time I'm running and I'm struggling, and he says, Wize, smile on your face, song in your heart. And I changed my thinking, and it helped me get through it. And I respect that man dearly. But then I think of life more generally, and I think of Tough Mudders, right? And I don't know if you guys have done Tough Mudders before, but you've been in the military, so you've done it for real, not just
for real, yeah.
This experience. So people who do Tough Mudders, and for the audience who might not know, it's a 10 to 12 mile run, I believe designed initially to train Navy SEALs, where you do 25 obstacles, you crawl in mud under barbed wire, you jump in a freezing cold ice bath. At some points you voluntarily get shot jumping over hay barrels. It's a cool experience.
Yeah.
Because the people who do it there go and they don't think like this is going to be torture, right? They don't think like if we made someone do a Tough Mudder, it would be cruel and unusual punishment. We would go to jail if we forced someone to do that. But people voluntarily go there. They pay hundreds of dollars to participate. They travel hundreds of miles and they have a blast. So what is the difference between somebody who would be forced to do a Tough Mudder, who looks at it as a have to, looks at it as a burden, or the person who pays hundreds of dollars to do it and does it with a smile on their face and a song in their heart? The difference is how they're looking at stress and how they're looking at life. Are they looking at life like a Tough Mudder? It's a positive challenge. The more challenge I get, the greater reward I get. Or are they looking at life as a burden? That this has power over me, that this is something I can't handle, that I am overwhelmed by, that this is torturous. And if you can shift that mindset, life is just a big tough mudder, and the whole world is the gym for your spirit. When
Yeah.
you look at it with that positive challenge mentality, then you can grow in your mental fitness. But it's teaching people the power of that switch.
Did your Navy SEAL know Jesse the Body Ventura? Because, I was a Navy SEAL. I went to Butts, and I was the governor of the great state of Minnesota.
So you're so right. In the Marine Corps, it was combat course. That's what we called them. And it was brutal, and we were getting screamed at a lot of times and all that, but it's still, it was fun, because you're diving through the mud, you're going underneath obstacles, you're going over obstacles, you're going up ropes, down ropes, all over the place. And so you have a different mentality about it, right? If you're forced to do it, that's when it's not fun. When you're doing it for fun. Yeah, that makes so much sense. It does. Sam, you done a Tough Mudder? Go ahead.
I have not done the Tough Mudder, no, but to test my own mental fitness, I've never been an endurance guy. Like in high school, I was never in shape. In high school, I couldn't run a mile, couldn't do a pull up, couldn't do a push up. I was 135 pounds soaking wet when I graduated at 18. I got into weightlifting in my 20s, more in my 30s. Now I'm 42, and it just like to work out to feel better than anything else, right?
Yeah.
But about back in 2015, I did a sprint triathlon, which for me was a lot. And a sprint tri was a 400-meter swim. I think it was like a 10-mile bike ride and then a 5K afterwards. And I trained for that, and it was uncomfortable. But, once again, for some people, it's cruel and unusual. And to some ultra runners, that's their warm up. But for me, it was a challenge. And, the fact that I trained for it, I looked forward to it, I completed it. My goal was to complete it, and I did so. It was definitely very rewarding and allowed me to understand that I can push myself a lot further than my mind usually tries to shut everything off.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Doc, do you have something you want to throw in there?
I don't remember. Happens a lot.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I did a little bit of some stuff back in my career, and during the training portions of it, I didn't know then what I know now, but I always just went to my little happy place, and I just didn't put out. Once my legs went numb and my knees and my feet were numb, I was gold, and I could go all day.
Yeah, it's true. So I see a couple of things. Let's touch on a couple of things. You talk about 7 steps to master your emotions in here. Talk a little bit about that, because that's important. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And if you're really trying to get on top of your game, you have to be able to master your emotions. You got to be it's kind of the story I was telling about, Braden and Megan, my kids. It's mastering those emotions, keeping those emotions in check. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I respect you military guys, because you're trained to embrace the suck, right? You're trained to look at emotions differently. And so when I think of emotions, we tend to have this script, and it's a really, really dangerous script that I see all the time. And it goes something like this. It's like, I'm feeling anxious. Why am I feeling anxious? I hate feeling anxious. I am anxious. My anxiety stops me from doing this. So what it is that we end up internalizing a feeling, which to me is fundamental flaw number 1, right? If I have a cold, I'm pretty healthy at the moment. Thankful for that. I got 2 kids that could go down at any time.
Yeah.
But right now, if I had a cold, I would say I have a cold. I would never say I am cold, right? I realize that the symptoms are going to come and go. I'm going to notice them. I'm going to respond to them accordingly. If I need rest, I'm going to take rest, right? I'm going to do whatever I need to do to listen to those physical feelings. But they're a blessing, right? I put my hand on a hot stove. I want to listen to that. I don't want to take a bunch of pain pills and numb it out. I want to respond accordingly. But we have this notion that there are bad emotions, right? And that we ought to numb them out, or we ought to not experience them. So for me, a better script is, I'm feeling a bit anxious, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I am resilient. I am courageous. I can grow through what I go through. Because the most important word in all of our self-talk is the word that comes after I am. And so if that word is I am anxious, I am depressed, we're going to manifest to become more of that. So I'm trying to teach kids, I'm trying to teach adults, when you say my anxiety, you're possessing something that is a feeling that you don't want to internalize. When you say I am depressed, you're manifesting a likelihood that you're going to stay and experience more depression.
Yeah.
So let's allow people to feel their feelings, but recognize inherently our feelings, even the bad ones, are a blessing. They're teaching us, right? If my boss ticks me off, I don't want to give up all of my emotional power and control to my boss and say my boss frustrates me. I kind of, and I know this sounds crazy, but I want to say thank you, world, for this feeling of frustration. I trust it's teaching me to be assertive and talk to my boss, to look to go back and invest in my schooling, to look for another job, to know my worth.
Yeah.
But instead of looking at these undesired emotions as teaching tools, we as a society are looking to medically numb them out, and we're giving them all of our power and control. And I want to help people take that power back.
So when you're out there, Sam, and you're working through the program and you're speaking and you're teaching people through the program, how do you go about talking about this with individuals?
I have to use my own personal experience, and it's one of the reasons that I tend to steer away from the traditional recovery methods now is because I refuse to say I am an addict or I am an alcoholic, because I agree with him wholeheartedly that whatever comes after I am, I mean, even Bruce Lee said it how many years ago, don't talk negatively about yourself even as a joke, because your mind doesn't know the difference, right?
Yeah.
And I refuse to do that. So I don't talk to them about what I think I was. I talk to them about who I am now and what it is that I'm trying to do. I'm a firm believer that I no longer have to live in my past. I don't dwell on my past. It's not my address anymore. There's no reason for me to spend any time there. I also like that whole, just even a basketball coach knows, you know, once you take that free throw, whether you make it or you miss it, there's nothing you can do about it. What do we focus on? Next play, right?
Yeah.
So I don't need to talk about what I was. I need to talk about what I want to be and where I want to go. And, you know, I am going to be successful. I am going to work on my recovery. I am going to pursue mental fitness. I am going to take care of myself. So I just want to make sure that I'm trying to spread more positivity when I speak versus just telling a whole bunch of negative stories. And now, hey, look at me, things are going okay.
I love that because I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's Denzel Washington. He does a graduation speech from college, and the whole graduation speech, one of my favorite speeches to watch, because he's talking about falling forward, how you have to fall forward in life, never fall back. And he's saying exactly what you're saying, Sam. You know, what happened back here, yeah, you can learn from it. Learn from it. That's good. But fall forward. Always fall forward. And I think too many people fall back. Too many people live in the past, and they're not getting, again, their mental fitness together to fall forward, to move forward, to become strong in that way. So I'm not constantly going back and pulling from the past and living in the past and feeling like a failure. Because you know what? Here's the reality of it, and y'all agree with me. Life is full of ups and downs. It just is. One day you're going to have a bad day. That doesn't mean tomorrow's going to be a bad day, you know? And so fall forward. Always, you know, look for those things that can make you better and make you. People ask me all the time, they're like, how are you always so positive? Because I live literally my cup is half full all the time. I mean, it's not even half full, it's full, you know? And that's because I just know there's going to be downs. I mean, things happen. Not everything goes perfect in life, but the next moment, the next minute, the next at bat, the next whatever, next landing in the Gulf Stream 280, you know, if I have a bad one, I better have a good one the next time. You know, it just doesn't matter what it is. You have to fall forward.
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned to do personally, and it's something that I fell short on for a long time, is I learned to continue from experience, and I lost that I have to start over mentality. And there's a lot of different, whether it's treatments or counselors, oh, you know, something happened, you relapse, whatever, you have to start over. And I mean, the only time something like that you have to start over is if you never come back. And if you come back, technically you're not starting over, because if you learn something from it, you should be able to continue from experience. It's not a get out of jail free card. It's not condoning poor behavior. But if you're going to mess up somewhere in your life, which you're going to, nobody leads a perfect life. When you do, what was the lesson? What can I accept about that lesson? How can I use that lesson to move forward and continue from experience and make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Yeah. So in the mental fitness, Steve, how are you teaching people to reframe their mindset?
So it's a game of percentages, and that's what we got to understand. So a simple definition of depression, you're not going to find this in the DSM. It's a little oversimplified, but roll with me. A simple definition of depression is regretting the past. A simple definition of anxiety is worrying about the future. And what you find with a lot of folks is they are living in those two mental states. They are regretting the past or they're worried about the future. They're worried about these hypothetical futures that usually never come true. They're stuck in the past and they're stuck in regret. So, what then we need to do is help people not be in a past negative, not be in a future negative, but use the power of practicing the thoughts of their minds to get into the present positive, to learn from their past mistakes, and to take action towards a better future. If you can teach people to hone the present positive and get their percentages away from regret and away from anxiety, and you move them into the present positive, that's powerful. But it takes practice too. It's a game of percentages. And it takes a positive attitude. So, Matt, you were saying, your glass is chronically half full. I appreciate that. I think in our society, we kind of have a myth, and it's if you're successful, you're happy. And we put so much emphasis on status and money and external validation that we forget, in my opinion, it's if you're happy, you're successful. And if you're grateful, you're happy. And if you could train your brain to get there too, that makes a big difference as well.
Yeah. I love how you define those two because you're so right. That's where people live. They literally live in the past or they live anxious about what's coming. And so many people, and they just, that anxiety just overwhelms them and takes control of them. And they're expecting the bad to happen or not expecting the positive to happen. So
Yeah.
true. Wow.
That's one of the most powerful parts of the book that he wrote, or where he challenges the reader to go through the 7 deadly phrases or the 7 toxic phrases and see where they're applying to their life. And when we constantly say things like, I can't, or I need, or this makes me, or always never, or I shouldn't, or happens to me. I mean, that there's just so much power in what he wrote. And I personally went through it and I was like, wow, having been in recovery for 20 years, this is better than any 4th step that I've ever done. Yeah, I wish I would have found this years ago. And it really allowed me to stop looking at all the things that I thought I needed and wanted, all the things that I was afraid may happen or have happened, and just, okay, what can I focus on right now?
Yeah, that's right. And that's so right, Sam, is what can you focus on right now? And how, if something does pop up, how can you move past it? How can you get control of it and move past it? That's really cool. So I want to talk about this. I want to bring up this dirty word here, right? So that's a dirty word. I mean, look, the phones, and I know you guys deal with this, but technology and phones have such a impact on everyone. Let's be honest, everyone. The keeping up with the Joneses, what trip is everybody on? What's everybody doing? Oh, that person's so skinny. I'm not skinny. I'm not in shape. I'm not, especially on our young ladies and stuff like that. I see it all the time. It's like, how do you see that? How do y'all address that? Do you talk about that? Do you see that a lot with where you go? Because there's so much social media pressure on people nowadays that it just, but here's the deal. But I'm also a realist about it. Let me say this. I'm also a realist about it. Guess what? It ain't going away. It's not going anywhere. So you have to learn how to deal with it and reframe your mindset about it and not worry about it.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Yeah. It's tough because iPhones are the death of intimate relationships because we're bonded with the phone and missing the person right in front of us, which is why I think therapy is actually so beautiful because it's a 53-minute time where you were just connecting with someone uninterruptedly. And so for me, that's part of the beauty and joy I get out of the work itself. But beyond that, I'm reading a book right now called Together. It was written by the former Surgeon General. It talks about the loneliness epidemic. And the initial thinking of phones and social media was that it would bring us closer together. It helps us stay in touch with, people across the United States, or it helps us meet new people from different countries and cultures. Well, none of that manifested because what has happened is that a good definition of loneliness is seeing someone else have or doing what you want and feeling excluded from it. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing this, all of these shoulds. We should have this body. We should have these friends. We should have this lifestyle. And it's not real. And it's perpetuating this feeling of loneliness, which is great for capitalism. It gets us to feel like, hey, if we're missing out, then we can buy something to fill that void, right? So the challenge is even though we have this technology that in theory could be used for good and connection, and deepening relationships and spreading valuable information, it has been used to perpetuate a fear of FOMO, really,
Yeah.
and has just kind of been taken over that
Would
way.
you call me?
So it's just tough because kids are they're gonna use their phones. They're gonna have a relationship with them. But we got to teach them what is a healthy relationship in that way, and to not have it supersede the protective factors of real bonding, team sports, good friendships, things like that that are
Yeah.
probably the higher priority there.
Well, so I was a lead-in question to, part two of the book is, mastering relationships. So you go through multiple weeks in the 12-week process of mastering relationships, and the phone, yeah, maybe it can be helpful in some ways, but it's also a big hindrance in some ways. And
Definitely.
yeah, Sam,
Yeah,
talk about
I
that.
touched on the whole phone thing a little bit, and it's funny, man, because if you look back, I used to be a huge George Carlin fan, and when he wrote The Paradox of Our Time, way before smartphones ever came out, he said, "We've been to the moon and back, but we can't go across the street to meet our neighbor." And I mean, I don't even want to know what he would say today. But I did an experiment once where I was speaking in high school, and I had all the kids stand up. And with everybody wanting to be a huge influencer now, one thing that social media will give you when you look at the analytics is your posts reach, right? So I post a picture, I post some content. Who did it reach? I have 1,000 followers. It reached 500 followers, and everybody wants to have the longest, biggest reach that they can. So I had these kids all stand up together, and then I was talking a little bit about reach. I gave that explanation, and I had them all put their arms out like this and touch the person next to them. I said, "This is your reach. Forget the person that lives on the other side of the country that's watching you on social media. Why aren't you trying to impact this person that's right here standing next to you that you can actually reach?"
Yeah.
And I personally probably fall victim to that sometimes myself. It's kind of what I do for business, but I do my best to make sure that I'm trying to change as many lives within the people that are in my circle and close to me, in my community, my neighbors, within my circle of friends, before I worry about how far that post that I put up on Facebook this morning is doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're talking about that and you're talking about some of the things about relationships, Steve, what are some of the things that you talk about in the book?
So it's interesting. You know, we're not taught anything about how to be in relationships, especially intimate relationships. Not one thing. And it's tough because even as adults, we work 40, 50 hours a week. And we're lucky if we get 5 hours of quality time with our significant other. And so the challenge here is we don't teach how to be in successful relationships. Now, there are people who have researched this quite well. John Gottman was a relationship expert who did a lot of fundamentally great stuff. Dale Carnegie taught us how to take genuine interest in others instead of trying to get people genuinely interested in us. Gary Chapman talks about the 5 love languages. We don't teach people any of that. We don't teach how to negotiate values and come to a loving compromise so that you're not sacrificing a core value and it's a win-lose situation. We don't talk about, we basically have a whole bunch of myths, right? We think that relationships come easy, that our values are all the same, that we know what each other's thinking, feeling, and needs, and we never hurt each other's feelings. And the
Yeah.
exact opposite of all of that is true. We're going to hurt each other's feelings, albeit unintentionally. We have to communicate what we're thinking, feeling, and need. We have to compromise on values and find those loving compromises that work for both. And relationships take work and they take maintenance. The challenge is we just don't have much education or tips how to be in those healthy relationships, how to communicate, how to find value compromises, and how to kind of put the work into a relationship to keep it kind of a high level priority and not, work on it the way that, my wife worked for 13 years to become a doctor. She works very hard to become a doctor. That's awesome. Good for her. I'm proud of her. She's rocking it. We ought to work just as hard to be in awesome relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I'm coming up on 29 years here in a couple months, and my wife 32. So total. So which is awesome, and that's just it. We have a wonderful relationship, and I love it. But the relationship. By the way, let me jump back. Dr. Gary Chapman, the 5 love languages. I know him. He lives in Winston-Salem and all that. So I totally believe in that book, in the 5 love languages. And I totally believe that we all speak different language. Obviously, we all have different personalities. And it's up to us to build those relationships to learn what that other person's personality is, right? You talk about the golden rule, do unto others, have them do unto you. Well, it's more than that. My dad used to call it the platinum rule. It's do unto others as they would have done unto them. Like, people like different things, people respond in different ways, but it's up to you to learn what that person's needs are and to answer that person's needs. And I think we've lost that. I think we've lost that ability to learn in relationships of what people need and to answer their needs and to focus on them. And so I think your book, you can address some of that, and relationships and all that. Relationships are so important.
And little tips go a long way, right? When you're upset, the world stops, I listen. That's a
Yeah.
repair skill from John Gottman. So we ought to talk about tears and repairs.
Yeah.
My friend and colleague Howard Irwin says the goal of being in a relationship is to outdo one another in honor and kindness,
Yeah.
just not keep immediate score.
Yeah.
Right. And he talks about filling each other's kind of love bank because you're going to pull debts from it. He talks about accepting others' eccentricities. And, there's so many things that Gottman will talk about, turning towards the bids of our partners so we're not accidentally upstaging them by correcting things or accidentally ignoring them on our phone or invalidating their emotional state. We taught just a little bit of that in college and schools. We'd see a much lower divorce rate. We'd see a lot healthier, happier relationships. We're just not taught that at all. And so a little bit of some tips go a long way. Just how to communicate, how to find, value compromises, how to work on the relationship and to put a little bit of effort into it to make sure you're always acting as if even when your partner isn't with you. You're always putting that person first. You're having fun together. You're prioritizing those love languages.
Yeah.
It goes a long way.
It does. Hey, Sam, so what I see in you, and again, because I see what you're doing, you're a role model and a mentor to a lot of people. And I love it when I see the post of a kid making that comment to you about how you set the example for them. But, you're able to take your story and the things that you go through and in a sense, extend your hand and say, I have been there. I've been through it. I've done it. Now follow me, because if I can do it, you can do it.
Mhm.
And that's building that relationship. That's building that bridge in that positive way to help people, move forward in a positive way. Talk about that a little bit and what that means to you when you get those comments from somebody, when you're talking to them and you shared, your story and you're able to carry that forward.
Man, that is that's why I do what I do. I mean, if Simon Sinek was sitting here and saying, "Hey, man, what's your why? Start with why." My why is to use my experience as lessons for others, right? When I speak, whether it's a nonprofit or a school or a corporate event, they're going to hand me an honorarium check, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to buy my kids, some food and hot dogs and pay the bills and stuff like that. But when that DM comes in and a kid tells me that he tossed his vape or lost his dealer's number, or they talked to their parents that they were self-harming and they threw away their tools, that was, and always will be my real paycheck. I cannot get enough of it. The fact that I absolutely love that God took the ugliest, darkest, and nastiest parts of my life, and he didn't just fix them, because that would have been too easy, right? He actually managed to turn them into something beautiful and use my darkness to shine light on others, which I will forever be grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's wonderful what you do. I've known your story for a while, interviewed you multiple times, and it's just amazing that you're taking what you're doing and turning in such positivity. And you go back to what we talked about, that's falling forward, right? Not living in the past, that's falling forward. And trying to take what you do and not let others make the same mistakes, not walk down that path. Again, if we haven't gone through it, we know somebody who's going through it, and that's just a fact, so we can always help another. So speaking of that, you talk about later on in the book, you talk about achieving your dreams. Now, this is important. Like that, like we're going through the end. Now we're setting it up to take people from, building them through this process, this 12-week process. In the last 4 weeks of this 12 weeks, you're going to go into achieving your dreams. So talk about that, because that's important. And you've hopefully by now you're getting them, they got that mindset going and they're going, okay, now what can I go do in life?
Yeah. It's cool because the first part is about mastery of self. So it's learning how to master stress, use it to your advantage, look at it as a positive challenge. It's learning how to master your thinking and change those percentages. It's learning how to master your emotions. Then we're going to talk about relationships, how to communicate, how to be in successful relationships. And then lastly, we're going to look at how to use your model to influence others. And so with that, what we want to see is that people have found throughout the course of that book what their values are, why they're their values, and how to engineer a life that is in as perfect as alignment as it can be with their actions and their values. Because I think that's where happiness comes from. I think that's the definition of achieving one's full potential, when we can figure out what those values are to us and align our actions with that.
Yeah.
So those last chapters, they get into goal setting, they get into kind of finding your own values, and then it gets into leadership. And it starts with, surprisingly, even being a great follower, finding great mentors. It starts with tips like always be learning, so that we keep investing in our character, because that's the game that doesn't quit or doesn't peak. It talks about be the light and be positivity in a sea of negativity in this world. And so it really talks about kind of not just, how to master yourself, how to master relationships, but how to turn off that doubter hater in our mind and work our dreamer doer muscle.
Yeah.
Because that's another combination, that when you are putting in the hustle muscle and you allow yourself to dream, and you can turn off that self-doubt, that imposter syndrome, and those critics, those external critics who are going to tell you can't, then you got a real shot at being a leader and being somebody that, using your example as the most influential tool you have to inspire and motivate others. And that's kind of what the last chapter is just all about, giving people that courage and those tips and that mindset.
The hustle muscle. I love that.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's good. I love it. Sam, you got anything to add to that?
If I had to give anybody one piece of advice when it comes to dreaming or achieving your dreams, I would say dream big, man. I mean, dream so big that other people think it's ridiculous. It's better to, what's the saying? It's better to shoot for the stars and hit the clouds or something like that. But
yeah,
I mean, I am living proof that, I'll tell you the biggest lie that I've ever heard. When I got sober, they kept telling me, kid, if you get sober and you stay sober, your dreams are going to come reality, right? I'm sure you guys have heard that. Anybody that's, done any sort of counseling or 12-step. And the reality is that was actually a lie, because I'm living proof that if you get sober and you stay sober, your reality will actually surpass your dreams. Because I got to tell you what, when I got sober, especially towards the latter end there, where there was relapse and overdose and arrests involved, my dreams were, I don't know, maybe I can get a job bagging groceries somewhere, because now I got to check off that box that says I'm a felon. I never dreamed that I would be doing a podcast with you fine fellas. I never dreamed that I'd be working with such a, talented guy like Steve, or that I would have, written 2 books and spoken to over 100,000 kids. I wasn't dreaming big enough.
Exactly.
So now my dreams are really big, so big that if I told you guys, you'd probably think they were ridiculous. But if I hit a couple of them, it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. No, look, I'm so glad you said that, because look, I think it's funny when I introduce myself and I go through my whole little spiel and I talk about the Marine Corps, leading missions in Afghanistan, planning with General Mattis, being one of the first pilots for the V-22 Osprey, flying, air medical, and then coming Team Penske's, helicopter pilot, now flying a Gulfstream 280. People are like looking at that. And then I say, well, that's just my side gig. Because I do feel like it's my side gig, because there's such a bigger picture out there with what we're doing here with Convene Communities and the people that are coming in and the programs that are going in. And we call Convene Communities a platform with a purpose. And there are people, watching, if you can see some of the comments and stuff like that, with Kate Gallahue, with Melissa, which Dr. Mel, with, I can go on and on about the list, but we're impacting lives. We're out there changing lives, and these people in the platform, and they get a testimonial. Guess who else gets that testimonial? It's me. And we see it all the time. It's just like what we talked about you, Sam. You got to dream big, and nobody's going to tell me that I can't do it. Nobody, because I can do whatever I want. I mean, I literally can. I just don't stop. It may not happen overnight. Mm-hmm. Right? This process has taken a long time. Steve, I'm sure the whole process of writing the book and doing the things you're doing, and Sam, building up your speaking and everything that you're doing, it takes time and effort. It doesn't happen overnight. And if you set, like you're talking about, achieving your dreams, you set those goals and you believe in yourself, the sky's the limit. And guess what? If you get knocked down today, just get up and go find some, somewhere else I can speak tomorrow, or find some. But I'm telling you, you can do what you want to do. people don't believe that.
It's
They
all
just,
relative, but we get a lot more satisfaction out of running a marathon than a 5K, right? So the greater the adversity, the greater the reward.
yeah.
I'm very proud of myself when I run a 5K. Speak for yourself.
Well, what y'all don't know is y'all see me keep doing like this and moving like, yeah, that's because I got my hip replaced 4 weeks ago. So, you know, if I can go run a 5K, I'll be happy. So, you know, going forward. But yeah, this has been great. And you know, we got 5 minutes left and our lesson here. And so, you know, just give everybody a little bit more about the overall program. Where can they find the book? You know, the workbook, the book, everything that y'all are doing. Look, I'd love to, you know, we'll carry on this conversation. I'd love to see y'all do some stuff in Convene. You know, we're making big difference out there for people. I think people need what you guys are doing, 100%. That's a different story. But yeah, just talk about where people can get in touch with you, where people can find the book, both of you, not just, you know, Sam, you and your speaking, and Steve, everything that you're doing. So who's first?
After you, Steve.
All right. So the website is mental-fitness.us. There we can you can find links to the workbook. You can find links to the personal journal. You can sign up with life coaches. You can get professional counseling services. That's the mental fitness website. Sam, tell us about our social handles.
Yeah, so social media, TikTok, IG, mental-fitness, Facebook is at mental fitness. Sam Anthony Speaks /mental fitness will give you access to the digital versions, the Kindle versions. It'll have access to my speaking info, Steve's speaking info. We speak as individuals. We speak together. We offer presentations, corporate keynotes, schools. Coming up here, we're actually going to be presenting on mental fitness to the FBI. We're extremely excited about that. So we're looking forward to coming to an organization near you, wherever you're at. We will speak wherever we're invited. You know, we're looking forward to feedback from the workbook. We're going to be built. This is more than just our LLC and our company. This is going to be a movement. We want next year, when a school hosts a mental wellness week, we want that to be mental fitness week.
Yeah.
We want mental health month to be mental fitness month.
Yeah.
So this is a lot more than you know, just a name on a workbook or the name of Steve's LLC or you know, something I've been, you know, keep teeing up for years. So thank you everybody that was watching. We appreciate the feedback. And if anybody has any questions, all the social media handles are on both mine and Steve's website.
Yeah. Well, we might have lost Steve there. But thanks for continuing to talk there and bring it, Sam. Look, I think you're spot on. I want to say this. I think you're spot on. I am so tired of the word mental health. I don't like it. I think it has a negative connotation. And I love mental fitness. I think it is spot on. I think what you're doing is reframing the mindset. And with that, y'all are going to do great things and you're going to impact so many lives across America. Thank you so much for being on. Let's continue the conversation. Let's, you know, see how we can do some great stuff together, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to change lives everywhere. So
thank you, Doc. Thank you, Matthew, for having us. This was absolutely fantastic. We're definitely gonna have to do this again sometime.
Yeah. Tell Steve we said thank you, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Have a great evening, fellas.
All right. Thank you.